Hello, magical soul, and welcome to the Awake Revolution podcast. I'm Marie Fleming Grant, and in this podcast, I'm going to be sharing insights, perspectives, stories, and tips, guiding you to drop the baggage, wake up the real you, and revolutionize it all. How you think, how you feel, and how you create, so that you can be all of who you came here to be. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. It's lovely to have you here. Welcome back if you are a returning listener, and welcome to you if you're a new listener. So how are you doing? How has your week been? I had a couple of topics that I was all ready to record an episode for you, but I've kind of just thrown them to one side in favor of talking about this particular topic in this episode. And it was inspired by one of my friends' posts on Facebook this week. And it brought up a few interesting thoughts, and I thought it would be a really interesting topic to explore, because I know that this one impacts a lot of us, and it really taps into some of the old programs, habitual patterns that we've been doing here on the earth plane, individually and collectively. And it's a powerful one. So I want to help you break free of that in this episode, just by listening and tuning into these ideas and perspectives. So what am I talking about? So I was scrolling through on Facebook, and I just happened to see a very short post of a friend of mine, and he shared something along the lines of how he was feeling unusually peaceful over the weekend, but he felt guilty. And I had an inclination of what he meant, but I wasn't fully sure. And when I looked into some of the comments, and there was discussion there, and someone had asked, well, why do you feel guilty? And he'd commented about, well, what is happening in the Middle East at the moment? So just for reference, I'm recording this kind of mid-October 2023, and there's all sorts of things happening over there in that part of the world. And it really got me thinking, and I actually popped on and I kind of gave an encouraging comment to my friend to say, actually, it's really powerful that you feel that way, and to keep going and to cultivate that. But I wanted to just open that up in this episode as a bit of a conversation, because I then started to see a few other people along with the same message, with the same sentiment. And you may have felt this, or you may be feeling this, or it may be something that comes up at some point along on your journey. So let's get into it, because one of the things that we get taught very early is when something in the world is happening, when a part of the world is in struggle or in despair, there is a whole guilt trip program, a whole guilt trip really, really laid on thick. And it comes at us through adverts, it comes at us through news, media, all of these different avenues, our televisions, radios, all of these things. And we have this mentality, and probably in some parts of the world it's stronger than in other parts of the world, but I'm talking to you here from the UK, but really I'm talking about the Western world, I suppose, who has maybe more of this way of thinking. And there's this whole guilt trip around, if somebody else is suffering or in struggle, you must suffer with them, and you must almost go down with the sinking ship, right? And it's particularly, and I am sort of touching in on the British culture, because that's the one I've grown up in, but it's very, very strong here. But no doubt it's going to affect you wherever you are, whichever part of the world you're tuning in from. But there's this whole culture of, if somebody is in struggle or in suffering in some way, then you need to wear that. You need to hold that burden and responsibility. And it's so deeply ingrained. It's so deeply ingrained to the point that we can then, as my friend shared, we can start to feel guilty when we are feeling good in our own selves, in our own lives, or even sometimes it's not to do with our lives, it's just the inner world. We just feel that frequency and vibration, that we just feel pretty good in that moment. And we can bring ourselves crashing down, because then we start to tap into, oh my goodness, look what's happening in the world. Now I feel guilty. Now I feel terrible. Who am I to feel good when there are humans suffering? And so I want to speak to you on that, to first of all empathize with you, because I've definitely had that as well, and I've definitely felt that. But I look at it differently these days, and it's because I've been really, I guess, taking time to disentangle from a lot of these programs. And one of the things that I was thinking about this week, was kind of thinking about this episode, I was thinking about how, and you may have your own experience, how as a child, I remember It was such a kind of common thing. I remember having an experience of, say, eating a dinner, and I was a very kind of like small eater when I was a child, and not so much now, but when I was a child, I just didn't used to take me much to feel full. I used to kind of pick at my food, and I just wasn't a massive eater at certain times. And so sometimes I would not be able to finish what was on my plate. And I remember this comment like being said to me regularly from well-meaning parents, but saying, well, look, you have to eat your dinner. There are people starving in Africa. And I grew up in the 80s. So this was like, at the time, and, it's still now, but at the time there were non-stop adverts, non-stop things, telling us this. Really, really, we were aware of this. And so this became almost like a mantra. You have to eat your dinner, because what about the starving children in Africa? And and I remember this memory because I don't know how old I was pretty young. And I remember feeling full on it, and I was like, I couldn't make sense of that, because I thought, well, I can't eat another bite. I can't. And what good does that do for those people in Africa? So I was trying to be kind of solutions orientated. That's still how I am now, but even as a child. And I remember I said to my parents at the time, and I wasn't being smart when I said this, I genuinely meant, I said something like, can we send this to them then? Can we send this food that I don't want to eat? Can we send it to them? And I remember it was in a moment, we had an interesting, childhood. So this was a period where my mum and dad were, we were kind of doing the normal family thing. So we had these kind of normal family moments, and I was grateful for that. But they kind of looked at each other and laughed. They burst out laughing, and it kind of stuck in my head, because they obviously, saw the funny side of it, and it made a point. Not that I was trying to, but the point was that unless I can send this to them and actually physically help them, me not eating this meal or the rest of it is not going to help or hinder anybody in Africa, right? And I understand the sentiment. I understand what they meant, but it was something that came back to me, and I started thinking about it this week, thinking it's the same thing of when we see something on the news, and bearing in mind, we've got to remember that the news, for example, is not about telling us what is actually happening. It is about manipulating our emotions, and it's about really getting us to feel a certain vibration and frequency, and it is a program. So it is about manipulating us in this way. And so when we hear these things in the news telling us about struggle and things happening in other countries, and regardless of whether they actually are happening in that way or not, regardless of that, because of course we know there is great suffering and all sorts of things happening right now, atrocious things going on in lots of areas in the world. But for us to tap into that we can't feel good because of it is a program. So I just encourage you just to breathe with that, if this is something you can relate to, because it is so easy to let yourself be lowered in that way. It's so easy for you to rein yourself in. You might even be doing this subconsciously. Remember, like 93% of us is operating on the subconscious. So you may not be aware that you're even doing it, but you may feel yourself contract down. You may feel yourself go into restriction when you hear things around suffering and struggle in the world, and then it feels like you can't fully enjoy your own experience because of the guilt. And I want to shine a light on this guilt that we carry, this kind of sacrificial energy that a lot of us have, most of us have. If we're good-hearted, connected, sensitive souls, we're going to have some of this. But what it doesn't assist anyone on the planet, and it doesn't assist us. And what I really want to direct you into is not to look away from these things, not to turn a blind eye, because I believe that is also not helpful. I think that there's a balance between looking at what is happening and being aware, right? Being a light worker or a way shower or a conscious soul, whatever you want to call yourself, we've got to be aware of what's happening, because how can we change things and create better things if we don't have an idea of what's happening? But we don't need to focus there and let it bring our energetic frequency, vibration, and our states down. And that, I feel, is one of the biggest traps one of the biggest traps that a lot of people are in. And I see it a lot on Facebook, Instagram. People make comments and they feel, you know, that, especially when you've got you're empathic. Many of the people I'm connected to in my community, you are same as me, but we've just got to be aware of the way to do it. So the way to do it isn't to go into sacrifice. It isn't to restrict ourselves. It isn't to downplay the good things that are happening in our lives or the good states that we feel. It is actually to step into them even more. Because here's what we're doing. Reminder, and I know many of you already know this, but we just got to hear it sometimes, or sometimes it could be the first time you're hearing it. We've got to remember that we are here anchoring in higher frequencies. So in real human terms, that means we're here to walk the path of holding light, which means that by us being in the highest vibration, and it doesn't mean 24/7, because we get to cry and go into despair and chaos sometimes, but by us walking the path and being who we are and being conscious and expanding and allowing ourselves to have better experiences and to grow into these and to really enjoy the moments that we're in. By doing that, this is helping more light be on the planet. And when there is more light on the planet that we're holding, it is lighting up the entire place. So even though it looks like there is chaos, destruction, devastation, and this is going to continue, I'm going to share more about that in another episode. But the way that we do that is to continuously hold our frequency. And again, just to reiterate, don't worry if you're feeling depressed this week or you're feeling like not in your highest frequency. It's bigger than that, because you are still holding it, by the way. You are still holding a higher frequency, even if you're raging angry, you got pissed off this week with something or someone. That is not how it works. You're not in a lower consciousness. You are a higher consciousness. You're always a higher consciousness. So you are holding the light in your physical form right now. So you can breathe and relax. You can have your human days, your human moments, your human emotions, but we've got a duty to really, really continue on this path. And I guess why I wanted to talk about it is because there's going to be so much more. Just to give you a kind of flavor of it for 2024, I was tuning into the energies. I'm going to do a separate broadcast on that to really go into some of the themes. But it's a big year and there's going to be a lot of challenge. So it's better to know, it's better to get prepared. So this is why I'm talking about this, because if we can go into that challenge, through those challenges, and navigate, knowing that, yes, even though there's suffering and struggle, people will be going through experiences. There'll be a lot of changes and loss and all sorts of different things. If we can still find moments where we feel good, but we don't feel guilty about feeling good, that is some of the most powerful things we can be doing. And remember, being a light worker, a way shower, a conscious soul, whatever label you want to use, you can do this just by being you. You don't have to have a certain job title to do this. You don't have to, like hold yourself out as being anything. You don't have to be doing live streams and podcasts. You can be living your life doing none of that, but very much here as part of this transitions team. And the transitions team are people like me and you who are here tuning into things like this, working on our own consciousness, being aware of what's happening in the world and doing our bit of what we can do in our own energy field. So I hope that by tuning into that, you can release yourself, even consciously, and then practice more and more. Release yourself of this guilt, any guilt that you have when you feel amazing, when you feel good, And it reminds me of in 2020, when everything shifted and the world went into chaos. I remember there was a lot of fear going on. Just open your Facebook and it was a non-stop fear and people were confused. And I wasn't in fear because I understood what was happening. And I know many of you also did at the time. And some people understood it a little bit later. But at the time, I remember when everyone was in lockdown and the world was kind of on standstill, I remember having these mornings where I was waking up here in my home feeling so magical. Like, for no reason, I would just wake up And I just felt so marvelous in my body, in my head, in my heart. And I think I wrote a post about that because I think I wrote a post along the lines of saying something like I almost felt guilty this morning. I said in 2020 because I felt so amazing. And then when I opened my Facebook and I started to see people going into fear, what was happening, they were believing some of the madness out there. Maybe people had been impacted in their work. There were a lot of shifts and knocks happening, and I could see and I could feel, because I can feel everything, especially on Facebook and social media. I can feel all the energies, and for a moment I did feel like almost as if I was doing something wrong, because how am I feeling good when these people are suffering? But as I explained today, I came to realize, and my guides also assisted me with learning, that no, it is a powerful thing. So to keep doing it. So to reiterate, if you're feeling amazing during times of chaos, devastation, confusion, loss, whatever's happening, you are not a selfish person. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not missing a heart or any of that, because you are actually just in a certain frequency. And milk that, really amplify it, do what you can, because we don't always stay in those states, right? And this is the other thing, this is how I see it. We don't always, and we don't need to, thankfully, because we're here in the human form. The pressure is not on us to always stay in these higher frequencies. So I like to see it as we're all on this transition team together. We're all here to help this shift. We take turns, right? So I might have the baton one day where I'm feeling super magical, lit up. I might post like 5 times in one day, because that's what I do sometimes when I feel like I have a lot to share. And I'm feeling so expansive and it needs to pour out of me. And then equally, I might have a couple of days where I feel a lot quieter and I feel more introspective, and I need to refuel myself, and maybe I feel a bit of something else. And I feel that, I imagine in my mind, I pass the baton to other people, and I see other people out there holding that frequency, right? And shining the light. So I don't have to pressure myself on the days where I don't feel it. So that's the other important thing. So it's not about putting pressure on yourself all the time, but knowing that when you feel good, allow it. And the more you feel good, the more you model it for others, the more you impact with your energy. Everyone you come into contact with can feel the energy, even if they don't know they're feeling it. They are feeling it. It goes into the Earth's atmosphere. You are making a shift. And that includes, even if you're a bit of a hermit, like I can be sometimes, and you don't want to leave your house for a few days because you just don't want to people. There's too many people out there. You're still emitting that frequency. So you are doing it in your own way. So it's just an encouragement, I suppose. This episode is for, to drop the guilt. I know many people are feeling this, and to allow yourself to enjoy. And you deserve to feel good. You don't have to earn, you just deserve to feel good. So if you do feel a little bit guilty sometimes, I just invite you to catch it. Now that you've heard this conversation, maybe you feel that you're ready to shift this, and just start to notice, kind of gently call yourself out when you notice it. And you can just remind yourself, re-listen to this episode if you need, or just gently talk to yourself, remind yourself that actually, no, by feeling good, you're assisting in this moment. So it's a really great way to break those old energies of sacrifice, suffering for the sake of others, and all that kind of very old paradigm energy. It's very, very old. And a lot of us did this in a past life. A lot of us did the martyr. We took vows of poverty and vows of silence and vows of sacrifice, all of these different things. We suffered for expression. We did the suffering energy. And that was in a different timeline. In the current timeline that we're in, we are moving into higher frequencies. So we don't need to suffer for the sake of others. We're doing it in a higher frequency. So that's why joy, love, freedom, flowing, all of those higher kind of more fun, enjoyable states, laughter, brilliant. Put something on and laugh if you can. But all of these are higher frequency states. So this is where we're at now, and this is what we're doing. So let me know how that feels. Any questions? or just any feedback, you know where I am. You can comment below, I believe, on here on Spotify at least. And yeah, reach out if you have anything you want to share off the back of this episode. And yes, thank you for listening. And oh yeah, I always forget to say this. If you've listened to the podcast and you enjoy it, I would love if you could hit a review. Just give a quick, you can rate it on the stars, give it a star rating on Spotify. That would really help me. And yes, feel free to share the episode with anyone that you feel would like to listen. And that is it for this week. So I send you lots and lots of love. And yes, I'll be with you in the next episode very shortly. So have a good week. And yes, keep being you. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I do hope you enjoyed it. Just to let you know, if you wish to reach out anytime to me with any questions or comments or feedback, I would love to hear. So have a look in the description of this episode and you'll find all the links to any of my groups, my website, my other social media platforms. So feel free to get in touch. Thank you so much again, and I will talk to you very, very soon.